Also, the intended BMW engines were delayed, so the first prototype of the aircraft we're about to see made in flight in 1941 with a single Junkers Umo piston engine up front. That design was to become the world's first operational jet aircraft. What we're about to see is the first ever British display by a beautiful reproduction of this machine. And here it is on the roll. Just look at this, the Messerschmitt ME-262 from the Messerschmitt Foundation and Airbus Heritage. A double failure of the BMW jets, however. Luckily, it still had a Umo piston engine up front. The first all-jet flight by a ME-262 took place on the 18th of July 1942. The Meteor, the Gloucester Meteor, an example of which you can see here in the static display, courtesy of Martin Baker Aircraft, which was Britain's first operational jet fighter. That didn't take to the air until March 1943. Such was the lead that Germany had obtained. In for its first pass, the remarkable shape of the ME-262. It was perhaps no surprise that the jet engines were switched to the Junkers Umo 004 with just under 2,000 pounds of thrust each. And in April 1944, this incredible pioneering machine was able to enter Luftwaffe service with a unit called Erprobungskommando 262, a test and service trials unit stationed at Lechfeld in Bavaria. That August, it was renamed famously the Kommando Nowotny after its commanding officer, and it conducted the first ever missions in history by a jet fighter, scoring several air-to-air kills. As an air-to-air fighter, but as a bomber. So it was that another Luftwaffe unit, Kampfgeschwader 54, converted to become the first ground attack unit on the type. It proved fairly ineffective in that role, and it really didn't do a great deal for the overall operational effectiveness of the 262. Large-scale fighter missions by these aircraft against Allied bombers started in early 1945. Their speed was far in excess of the piston engine fighter opposition they were coming up with. The top speed of the ME-262 was about 560 miles an hour. Compare that with the P-51D Mustang at 440 miles an hour. Just what it was like for an Allied fighter pilot to come up against a ME-262 in combat for the first time was provided a few years ago by a P-51 pilot veteran of the American 55th Fighter Group, Richard G. Gibbs.
I remember one time I was coming back from a bombing mission in the vicinity of Germany, all by myself for whatever reason. And I was about 30,000 feet, and I looked down there and I saw a 262 at about 20,000 feet going the other direction. So I thought, boy, this is a chance to get that jet. I did a half roll, what we call a split S, which is I had no way on earth.
Insufficient Me-262s to make a material difference to the Luftwaffe's efforts. As the late naval test pilot, Captain Eric Winkle-Brown, pointed out, the 262 was no dogfighter, but it was an effective bomber-destroyer. Its radius of turn was never that great, but it could outrun all Allied fighters until the advent of the Gloucester Meteor, and even then there were no jet-to-jet combats during the Second World War. The 262 in any case was faster than the Gloucester jet. A report by the Royal Aircraft Establishment, which evaluated captured 262s after the war, said this was down to the higher profile drag of the Meteor. That had a Meteor 3 been fitted with engines of the same thrust as the Me-262, it would still have been 20 miles an hour slower than the Messerschmitt. Against that, the Meteor's takeoff run was shorter and the aircraft more manoeuvrable. Production of the Me-262 had reached about 1,400 by the end of the war, and more were produced under license in Czechoslovakia post-war. None have survived in flying condition. This is part of a replica project undertaken in the United States, which began in the 1990s using an original two-seat Me-262 supplied by the US Navy as a pattern aircraft. The first of them took to the air in December 2002. This is the second of the 5 built. It was delivered to the Messerschmitt Foundation at Manching in Germany in the spring of 2006, and it's the only one of these aircraft to have been operated in Europe. Would ever have thought we'd see this shape in British skies.
Most stunning silhouette that we've got here this weekend. I remember building a model of one of these many years ago as a kid, and never thought I'd see one flying here at Royal International Air Tattoo.
When it arrived in the UK last week, it was the first time a Me-262 had flown in Britain, by my reckoning, since the 29th of November 1945, when a captured original example made the last recorded flight of a series of performance and handling trials carried out by the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. That aircraft is now at the RAF Museum London in Hendon. But how lucky we are that Airbus Heritage, the Messerschmitt Foundation and the Flugmuseum Messerschmitt at Manching should have acquired and been operating this aircraft for now 17 years. Finally, it's come to the UK, and it has not disappointed. The airplane in the hands of Airbus test pilot Gary Kreienbühl, a man of vast flying experience. He's been in the flight test business for more than 30 years, has frontline types such as the F-5E Tiger, the FA-18 Hornet, the Tornado and the Eurofighter Typhoon in his logbooks. But surely he's proudest of his exploits flying this, the Messerschmitt Me-262 AB-1C.